Okay, the Rambam writes in the introduction, he says, Yesh b'chlol on shalosh vesem mitzvos. There are 23 mitzvahs relating to the law which pertains to the king. Eser mitzvahs aseh, positive commandments, u'shloshesh mitzvahs lo saseh, and 13 negative commandments, which pertains related to the king. And these are he's delineating what they are. Again, 10 positive and 13 negative. It's very interesting. 10 is always Aser Sadibros, 10. And 13 is, we know, is a child becomes bar mitzvah at the age of 13. That's the number of obligation. And everything is 13. Yud Gimel Ikra Emuna, the 13 tenets of Jewish faith, 13 attributes of mercy. I'm just saying, just pointing it out. 10 positive commandments, 13 negative commandments, just to remember. Aleph, the first of the positive commandments. Limnos Melch Yisrael. The Jewish people have an obligation to appoint a king to be the monarch over the Jewish people. That's the first of the positive commandments. 2, Shel Yimnem B'Kal Gerim. Is a negative commandment. You're not permitted to appoint the king if he's from not a Jewish pedigree. He's a convert. He could be a tzaddik. He could be special. But if he's not a convert, if he's a convert, he doesn't qualify to be the king. The Gemara tells a story. In Shabbos, there were 3 non-Jews who wanted to convert to Judaism. And each one came with a precondition. He'll only convert on that condition. One came with a condition. He comes to Shammai. Shammai was the contemporary of Hillel, Hazokim. Comes to Shammai, and he says to Shammai, one of them, I'll only convert if I could be the high priest. If I can't be the high priest, I'm not going to convert. You know what Shammai says to him? Do me a favor, don't waste my time. Goodbye. Have a good day. He goes to Hillel, and Hillel was a whole different type of personality. And he says to Hillel, the same precondition. I'll only convert to be a Jew if I could be the high priest. If I can't be the high priest, I'm not converting. Hillel says, but do you realize that King David, who's the anointed king of Israel, he's not qualified to be the high priest. And you want to be the high priest? So he says to Hillel, he says, if that's the case, I don't have that level of audacity. I should be the high priest if even King David doesn't qualify to be the high priest. He converted to Judaism. Next one comes. I'll only convert if I could teach me one principle which encompasses the whole Torah its entirety. And he goes to Shammai and he gives him this prerequisite. Shammai says, something, don't waste my time. Have a good day. Throws him out. Goes to Hillel with the same precondition. I'll only convert to be a Jew if you could teach me one principle which encompasses the whole Torah. So Hillel says to him, the principle is, don't do to your fellow man something that you wouldn't want to be done to you. That is the core principle of Judaism. The rest is all commentary. What you despise, what you dislike, don't do to your fellow. And if you follow that core value, that touches upon every aspect of the Torah. And what do you think he does? He converts. So Hillel converted the first and the second one, which Shammai originally had dismissed. The third one comes in, he says, I'll only convert if I can be the king of Israel. If I can be the king of Israel, I'm happy to convert. But if I can't be the king, I don't want to be convert. Like a person says, he applies for a job at General Motors. He says, I'm only going to accept the job if I'm even maybe the chairman of the board. If I'm not going to be chairman of the board, I'm not interested. They say, something, have a good day, go get yourself a government job. I think you're better off. Okay? So the third one, do you realize that unless you're from the Davidic line, regardless who you are, you don't qualify to be the king of Israel. Even if you're not from the Davidic line, you can be the greatest Jew. He says, if that's the case, I'll convert. converted. So the three who Shammai dismissed, Hillel, through explaining it, why they weren't qualified in his manner, they converted. These three converts they meet a number of years later, and they say something, and they say, if it would have been for Shammai, we wouldn't be Jews today. But it's only because of the humility and the tolerance of Hillel, that's why we're Jewish. So thank God there's a Hillel that he was able to deal with us the way he dealt with us, and therefore we're Jewish today. That's the story. That's the Gemara in Shabbos. So the Rambam writes, there's a mitzvah to appoint a king. However, if his background, he's a convert, regardless of how righteous and devout he is, he does not qualify to be the king, and it's a negative commandment if you should appoint such a person. Okay? So we have one positive, one negative commandment. Gimel, the third law which pertains to a king. A king is not permitted to have more than so many wives. Why? Because the Torah explains the reason is because they somehow influence him. A king has to be totally independent, that he could not be influenced. So the Torah sets the number, 18 is maximum. Beyond that, he could be subject to influence. Therefore, if he crosses that line, he's a violation of the negative commandment. And the Mishnah tells us in Sanhedrin that even if the 19th wife is as devout as Abigail, who's one of David's wives, he couldn't take her. 18 is maximum. Why 18? The Torah sets that number, 18. Beyond 18, you could be influenced. He's not permitted to raise stables of horses. Negative commandment. Why? Because the pedigree, the thoroughbreds, were actually raised in Egypt. And when we left Egypt, Hashem said, you can no longer go back there. So since raising horses, having stables of horses could actually cause you to return to Egypt, therefore you're not permitted to get involved in raising horses. That's a negative commandment. That's explicit in the Torah. A person can be involved in enterprises to increase his financial worth. This is while he's king. If he comes into the kingship wealth, he's a wealthy man. But now to begin investing to increase his wealth, that is not permitted. But he's permitted to make investments to cover the cost of his armies, to cover the cost to maintain the people. That is permitted. But for personal financial gain, that's a negative commandment. He's not permitted. La'achrin shiva amimim. He has an obligation. The Torah says when we go into Israel, into the promised land, we have to annihilate the 7 nations of Canaan. This responsibility is on the king. That's a positive commandment. No sole survivor. That's a positive commandment. And there's a negative commandment, shalachios ben kol neshama. If you should leave any of them over and you don't annihilate them, that's a negative commandment. Lo schai kol neshama. Limchos bizar shalom molik. The king has an obligation to obliterate the remembrance of Amalek. There should not be a trace of them. So when King Saul went to war and he was told by God to wipe them out, and King Shmuel was the prophet at the time, he failed because he allowed the king of Amalek, Agag, and eventually he was killed by Shmuel. Samuel the prophet killed him, but he was in violation. He did not carry out God's order to annihilate them. That's a positive commandment. Another mitzvah. Not only the actual annihilation, lizkor masha'osa Amalek, to remember what Amalek did to us when we left Egypt. We were attacked, we were weary, we were on the road. They were a nation who did not fear God. To remember. And if you remember who they are, that will engender this internal intolerance for them, and you're going to carry the positive commandment of annihilating them. Just to stop for a moment, there's a question in halacha, in law, Jewish law. We had the Shabbos before Purim, we had people went to shul to listen to Parsha Zohar. We heard the portion about where the Torah discusses in Dvarim, the book of Dvarim, that portion, remember what Amalek did to us when we left Egypt, so on and so forth. There's a mitzvah to listen to that reading. Normally, the reading of the Torah Shabbos is rabbinical, that you have to listen to the reading. But this particular reading is a Torah obligation, to remember what Amalek did to us. Therefore, it has to be read from a Sefer Torah, and it's read within the context of a minyan. You have a quorum. So a man definitely is obligated. The question, what about a woman? Is a woman obligated in Parsha Zohar? We all know that any mitzvah which is time determined, what they call time oriented, a woman is exempt. A woman has no obligation to say the Shema. A woman has no obligation to sit in the sukkah because it's a time, it's at a specific time of the year or a specific time of the day, Krishma in the morning, in the evening. A woman is not obligated to take the four species of the lulav, also because it's time determined. Parsha Zohar, hearing the reading of Zohar, it's any time during the year. It's not limited to a specific time. And therefore, simply, there's no reason to differentiate between a man or a woman. As a man is obligated in this positive commandment, a woman is obligated. But yet, the Chinuch who's a contemporary of Rambam, a little after, who's a codifier, he writes, a woman is exempt from remembering what Amalek did to us. Why? What's the reason? Because the only reason why you have to remember what they did to us is to ignite that intolerance and hate for them, which will cause us to wipe them out, to annihilate them. And since Noshim Lav Minos Luchama, since a woman is not warfaring, a woman doesn't go to war. So therefore, there's no reason to remember, because the remembering is only to facilitate and bring about the end result is the annihilation. Therefore, a woman has no obligation to remember what Amalek had done to us, because she doesn't have the separate second obligation of annihilating Amalek for that reason. But a man who has an obligation to annihilate them, because the man is warfaring, therefore he has an obligation to remember to keep that hate alive within us, that we should be intolerant for their existence, and therefore he annihilate them. Okay, number 10, not to forget their evil deeds, and how they ambushed us on the way. We were vulnerable, we were traveling, we had no fortifications. Yud Aleph, 11, Shalishkom Beretz Mitzrayim. A Jew is not permitted to live in Egypt. It's a negative commandment. L'shloach shalom liyoshvei ho'ir shetzar moleo. When we conquer Canaan, who must we annihilate? That's only not willing to subjugate themselves to us. But let's say we lay siege and we send them a peace flag, a peace pipe, and we tell them, we'll allow you to survive if you're going to be under our domination, our under dominion. And they send back, we will fight you to the death. If they send you back that kind of response, then you wipe them out. But if they're willing to accept the dominion of the Jews and they're going to be subjugated to us, then they allow them to survive. That's the Rambam. They send shalom, a peace pipe, to the dwellers of the city when it's under siege. And to deal with them, it's written in the Torah, Bim Tashlim, Bim Lo Tashlim. Are they willing to make peace or not willing to make peace? If they're willing to live in peace, then we let them. But what is their status? They're subjugated to the Jewish people. But if they're not, then it's all out war, then you destroy them.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
Are Jews allowed to visit Egypt?
There's a question. When it says, do not return to Egypt, is it, from Rambam, it seems to live there. The visit would not be a problem whatsoever. Lishkon. He doesn't say levaker. Levaker means to visit. Lishkon means to dwell 12 there.
Thank you.
Lidrosh Shalom Me'amon Umoav Bilvad Kishar Aleim. The Ammonites and the Moabites, where they did not extend their hospitality to us, although they were indebted to us, because if not for Avram, who saved Lot, Lot was the forefather of the Ammonites and the Moabites. And we're in the desert wandering for 40 years. They did not extend hospitality. Not only that, they conscripted Bilam to destroy us, to curse us and destroy us. Therefore, you don't offer the peace pipe, Taman and Moab. When you laid siege, you destroy them. When you lay siege around the city or location, you're not permitted to destroy the fruit trees. Negative commandment. Because usually when you go in, scorched earth, you destroy everything. You're not permitted. Now, the law is, let's say you buy a piece of property, and on the property, you want to build a house, and there is an orchard, right? Are you permitted to uproot the trees to build your house? If they're fruit trees, you're not permitted. So what do? And the Gemara tells us, God forbid, it could have besides the Torah violation, you could have very dire consequences. If they're fruit producing, the Torah says the tree is like the human being. It continuously, it propagates, it replenishes its fruit. It's a perennial. God forbid, the Gemara tells in one location that if a person cuts down the fruit tree, God forbid, it could have a negative consequence that his children, God forbid, may die. They will not merit any divine protection. So the way it's done, if you have a fruit tree on your property, although if for financial reasons it's not worthwhile to have it, you're permitted, but still it's such a sensitive area, we don't tamper with it. So what they do is they transfer ownership of that location to a non-Jew, and you have a non-Jew uproot it. So the tree that's being uprooted is not being done by a Jew, it's being done by the non-Jew. That's how you circumvent this problem. Okay.